Hello. In this video, I'm going to show you how to do some data validation and how to recognize input failure. So we are going to simply read an integer. So let me say this program demos input failure and data validation, which is what I want to do. So we need all our standard stuff that we usually do for our code, IOStream and the namespace. And we're going to start out by declaring just an integer. Say, for example, age. Int age equals, we're going to say initialize it to 0. And then we're going to ask the user to enter an age. And let's read cin, our extraction operator, age. And then we are going to simply output you entered and the age that they entered. And that's it. So let's build it and run it. So F7 should build it, or you can build solution. And run it, debug, start without debugging. And it says enter an age, and let's enter 23. And it says you entered 23. Now let's run it again. And let's enter, for example, A. It says you entered 0. So A is obviously not the right age. So when a user enters bad data, you have to be able to guard against it and come up with an error message that says you have entered wrong data. Not only that, if you try to do anything else, so let's say I have an integer and I also have a double GPA, and I tell the user enter an age, and then I tell them enter your GPA, and I try to read in GPA, and then I want to output you entered your age and your GPA equals whatever GPA they enter. Now let's try the same thing. Let's build it and let's run it and see what happens now if we input bad data. So let's say enter an age and I enter A. It says enter your GPA, and we have trouble because it never waits for us to enter our GPA. So what happens here is when cin is confronted with a character or something that's not an integer, it fails. And when it fails, it's not able to do any more input reading. So a good thing to do, data validation, after you read every data, it's good to always validate the data. So how do we validate the data? You check for cin. Cin returns true or false based on what it receives. So if it receives bad data, it's going to fail, and so not cin will be true, and it will come into this loop here. And then you're going to say something like bad input. You give the information to the user, say try again, give them a couple of more chances, or how many ever chances you want to re-enter the data. So you can say see out, bad input, try again. And you're going to try to read the data again, cin age. Now before you do that, you must also fix cin. So the first thing to do after you enter the loop is you're going to say cin.clear, which will clear cin, meaning reset it. Then we do cin.ignore, which ignores everything in the input buffer, all the garbage that's been entered by the user. So what this does is it says cin.ignore 100 characters or the new line, whichever comes first. Because after the user has entered Done entering all the data, he or she is going to hit enter, and that's the new line character. So it will ignore 100 characters. 100 is just a number that you pick. You can pick 100, 200. It's essentially the number of characters it's going to ignore, or the new line, whichever comes first. So that way, if the user enters A, B, C, D, all of that will be ignored. Scene will be reset to a good state, so it can start reading again. Then we output the error message and you read. And since this is in a while loop, it's going to stay in that loop as long as Cn is bad, which means if Cn is false or 0, not Cn will be true, and it will keep staying in this loop until the user enters good input, at which point in time Cn will be true, not Cn will be false, and it will come out. And then we are ready to read the next input. Now the next input, being double, could have the same problem. So we are simply going to copy that code, and we're going to put it right here after reading the GPA and do the same data validation. So this is guarding against bad data. We do data validation. And this is a very important part of this class, to make sure that you validate all the data that is entered by the user. You cannot let the user enter bad data. You have to have some check to make sure that the user enters good data and that you validate that data. So now let's try to run this program again. And so now when you look at your output, it says enter an age. So you enter AS, it says bad input, try again. So let's enter 12. Then it says enter GPA. So if you again type in characters by mistake, it's going to say bad input. So let's try 3.8 for GPA. It says you entered 12 and your GPA equals 3.8. Even this, there are some other things you can do. Your user interface could be better. Instead of saying you entered, you could say you entered an age equals 12, so it's a lot more clearer. So data validation, user interface, and all those things are a very big part of this class and all the labs associated with it. So this program shows you how to read an integer or a double and do data validation and guard against bad data. So when you write code, please make sure that you use scene.clear, scene.ignore, and this while loop to make sure that you guard against bad data and you read good input.